Welcome back. This is the big story. Of course, Migori Governor Okoth Obado today was will spend another night in the cell, being the fourth night that he will spend behind bars. He's expected to get his bail hearing application tomorrow in the afternoon before High Court Judge Jessie Lesiit. And even as this case continues, conversation now shifts to whether it's time to impeach the governor on a number of grounds stipulated on the Constitution, Article 181 and Article 73 on the leadership and responsibilities of a state officer or leader. To be specific, Dr. Lutalala Muhwana and Manwa Hosea, both lawyers, are joining me for this conversation. We've had from both lawyers here. Manwa Hosea, just before we went on a break, you said this being both a moral and constitutional question, the Migori governor should step aside and not wait for impeachment. Dr. Lutalala, what do you think about that? Should we not wait for that impeachment? Should he just carry that cross and decide, you know what, I'll step aside to protect the sanctity of this office?
You see, Akisa, I always say that for every commentary that we do, we must contextualize it. Because we don't live in heaven, we live in Kenya. And these things that are happening are not unprecedented in the context of a leader falling short of the glory of the Constitution, for lack of a better word, and asking the moral question. I agree with my learned colleague that when it comes to the perception, to the picture that the acts of a governor portray, there arise practical challenges. For instance, he has raised the issue of what happens if the good governor is denied bail tomorrow? That is a practical question. Because if indeed his bail application doesn't come through, then effectively he's unable to discharge his duties. So yes, it makes practical sense to contend that the good governor then must step aside and allow the people of Migori to have another leader who can be able to manage their affairs. But Akisa, let me also say this. It is not just a moral question. It is a constitutional dictate. As a state officer, the Constitution stipulates very clearly that at any one time, whether in private or in public, whether in his private life or his public life, at no one time should his interests conflict with the interests of the public good. And it also states, under the requirement for state officers, that whatever it is that a state officer does must be one that brings respect, confidence, and public trust into that office. So yes, when you look at the purity of the Constitution, there are valid grounds to believe that perhaps the County Assembly of Migori ought to take that up and run with it. But Akisa, that is where the challenge begins. Because who among the leadership of this country can throw the first stone? Don't we have leaders, some governors, whose serious moral, ethical issues in direct conflict with the provisions that we are citing in the Constitution have been raised, but they have kicked and beaten back and hung on in the office? So that is why now a valid constitutional dictate is merely reduced to a moral dictate.
So what, the bar had already been set too low?
I think so. I mean, without going to the details of mentioning names, Akisa, yes, you know that we have governors in this country, is in the public domain, whose acts have fallen short of the constitutional dictates. And therefore, as my learned colleague has said, if we distinguish the criminal aspect which the due process has to go on and dwell on the constitutional requirement that the conduct of a public officer must be like Caesar's wife, beyond reproach, then it becomes a question of who should cast the first stone.
I mean, looking at the few things that, or the details that have been given to us by the ODPP that are already currently on the public domain, already the governor admitted to be having a relationship with Sharon Otieno. That has been captured by Manuel Hosea, who says this on its own is already gross misconduct for someone of his stature and holding a high office like that of a governor. Then we know about a phone communication that links him to the scene of the crime. The governor has already been prosecuted in the court of public opinion. I mean, doesn't it just complicate issues for him?
Akisa, let's distinguish the criminal aspect, as my learned colleague has said, and let's perhaps stick on the issue of the moral aspect, for lack of a better description. By Honorable Okoth Obado having a romantic affair with the late Sharon Otieno, and by him admitting that indeed the baby was a result of their interaction, that on its own brings his office into disrepute. That's a fact. Yes. And that's how the Constitution intended. The Constitution intended that the standards for public officers must be very high. But as I've said, we must contextualize this commentary. Haven't we had top leadership in this country admitting that they made their girlfriends pregnant, and in fact they are maintaining them, and nothing has been done for them? So it is really a question of, as I said, who should throw the first stone?
Thank you.
That's the dilemma, Akisa. But as far as the Constitution is clear, the Constitution lays the bar for state officers, for Mheshimiwa Obado, very high.
Okay.
The fact that he has admitted that he pursued a private interest, a personal interest with this lady, and went to the extent where situations reached in the public domain, he admitted that his moral standards are no good enough. Okay. That on its own, on a strict interpretation of the Constitution of 2010, it has not brought honor, dignity, and confidence in his office.
I'll let Mr. Manuel weigh in on this argument. Who really should throw the first stone from the arguments that we are getting from Dr. Lutalala here?
I think first, Akisa, it's very important to note that after the promulgation of the new constitution, Parliament endeavored to come up with 2 acts of Parliament which were supposed to actually put more meat into Chapter 6 of the Constitution, that is leadership and integrity, and also the national values under Article 10. There was legislated the Leadership and Integrity Act, and also the Public Officers Ethics Act, which was supposed to give meat into the moral issues which were created under the Constitution. Now, as it stands right now, there is no enforcement under those 2 acts in terms of ensuring that the moral aspect is followed. And that's why my senior colleague he has alluded to the conduct of other leaders who have been in office and who have found themselves in the circumstances that Governor Obado has found himself, and thereby creating a precedent that the issues surrounding him are not new, and so the Constitution, or rather the due process on the other side, should end. I want to look at the decision on the case that was filed by the civil society in 2013 when His Excellency the President and his deputy were actually being subjected to crimes against humanity in the International Criminal Court. The president basically watered down the provisions of the Constitution by actually giving leeway to persons who have been implicated or who are suspects to criminal activity to actually continue holding office or rather to run for office. Now, away from that, we have had, or rather we have seen certain public officers who deliberately want to use the criminal process, like, I cannot vacate office until I've been proved beyond reasonable doubt to have committed this crime. I want to detach the argument from that criminal aspect to the moral aspect, because obviously the Constitution, even though it doesn't have mechanisms to enforce the provisions with regard to leadership and integrity, there is that personal move as a senior leader, or rather a governor, to actually ask yourself whether you are really serving your people by defending yourself in a court of law for a capital offense, at the same time, running an office which has already been marred with, or rather, the integrity has already been watered down. So yeah. I think the first person to start this conversation should be the County Assembly of Homa Bay, because it's the one that the Constitution has given powers to, appeal upon their leader, that is the governor, to actually either step aside or start the process of impeachment, because that is what the Constitution provides for. Mm-hmm. I don't think whether it's either the governor himself decides to resign or step aside, or the County Assembly actually takes up that mandate that it's given under the Constitution to institute impeachment proceedings based on the fact that the grounds of abuse of office and gross misconduct have been actually attained through what has been the investigations and what has been admitted by himself. So I believe that it's something that if I don't think whether the court process should actually be an impediment in terms of waiting until the court determines as to whether he was guilty of the murder or not. Mm-hmm. I believe it's something that can be carried on by the county government to ensure that sanctity of the office that we talked about is respected.
But Dr. Muhwana makes an argument that the bar has already been set too low, and we have seen almost similar cases, not of murder, but with regards the moral question that or the moral aspect of this particular case. Do you agree? I
think I agree with him to some extent, but I think that the standards that were created by the case in question that was filed by the civil society during the presidential elections in 2013 was the one that actually, as I stated, watered down the provisions of the Constitution. And I believe that up to date, that was a very bad case, considering that the drafters of the Constitution foresaw situations of this nature, where you have been implicated or suspected to have committed a crime. Mm-hmm. And that boils down to the office that you hold. They foresaw a situation where this person is supposed to vacate that office for the respect of that office and for the respect of the people that he represents, so that he can be able to take his own cross in terms of ensuring that he cleans up his or her name before he takes up the responsibility. The threshold that was created by the Constitution, and which is still there, has been watered down by this court precedent and also the conduct of certain public officers in government. Okay. But I believe that we can vacate that traditional precedent, because there is political goodwill at the moment, especially in terms of matters, economic crimes or corruption in public office. We should actually take advantage of the good political will to ensure that perpetrators of this kind are brought to book, so that we sanctify the institutions that have been created by the Constitution, and we also give, or rather demonstrate to the Kenyans that the offices that have been created under the Constitution are respected, and the people who take up those positions also comply with the requirement under the Constitution.
All right. Thank you very much. That is a big story for us tonight. Manwa Jose and Dr. Lutalala Muhwana, both lawyers, just looking at the implications of this case on Migori Governor Okoth Obado. What are the chances that he would be impeached over this particular case? And of course, on various grounds stipulated under the Constitution and various articles therein. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here tonight. I want us to wrap it up on that note. Up next, Ben Kitili with KTN Primetime News. My name is Akisa Wandera. Have a good night.